It was supposed to be just another Sunday. Nothing special, nothing out of the ordinary. Just another weekend trying to keep two kids entertained without spending money they didn't have. David pulled into the gravel parking lot of Pine Ridge State Forest just after 9 in the morning. His old truck coughed twice before finally settling into silence. In the back seat, his daughter Sophie was already unbuckling her seatbelt, and his son Tyler was pressing his face against the window looking for squirrels. "All right, you two. Same rules as always," David said, turning around to face them. "Stay where I can see you, no wandering off the trail. And if you see any animals, we look but don't touch." "I know. Dad?" Sophie said with the confidence of an 8-year-old who'd heard this speech 100 times. "Can we bring the butterfly net?" "Sure thing, kiddo." David grabbed their small backpack from the passenger seat. Inside were 3 water bottles, some granola bars, and Band-Aids. Not much, but it was enough. It had to be. Ever since his wife packed her bags 3 years ago and decided that family life wasn't for her, David had learned to make do with less. A lot less. He worked construction 6 days a week, and Sundays were for the kids. No TV, no video games they couldn't afford anyway. Just him, Sophie, Tyler, and whatever free activity he could find. The state forest had become their regular spot. No entrance fee, plenty of space to run around, and the kids loved it. They started down the familiar trail, the one marked with blue blazes on the trees. Tyler ran ahead, his sneakers kicking up dust, while Sophie walked beside David, swinging the butterfly net like a sword. "Dad, do you think we'll see a deer today?" she asked. "Maybe. We saw that family of them last month, remember?" "Yeah, but that was last month." "I want to see one today," David smiled. Kids had a way of living completely in the present moment. No worrying about the electric bill that was due on Tuesday, or the fact that his truck probably needed new brakes soon, just right here, right now, and whether or not they'd see a deer. They walked for about 20 minutes, following the trail as it curved around a small creek. Tyler had found a stick and was dragging it along the ground, making patterns in the dirt. Sophie had given up on butterflies and was now collecting interesting rocks, filling her pockets until they bulged. "Can we go to the big rock?" Tyler called back. "The one we can climb on?" "Sure, buddy. Just a little further up." David knew this trail like the back of his hand. Every twist, every landmark. They'd been coming here almost every Sunday for 2 years. It was free. It was peaceful. And it gave him a few hours where he didn't have to think about everything he was struggling to provide. They reached a wider part of the trail where it split in 2 directions. The main path continued straight, but there was a smaller trail that led up a slight hill to a cluster of large rocks that the kids loved to climb. David was about to turn toward the rocks when he heard something. At first he thought it was an animal. A low sound, almost like a groan. He stopped walking and held up his hand. "Hold on, guys. Be quiet for a second. What is it?" Sophie whispered, her eyes going wide. "Shh. Just listen." They all stood still. The forest was quiet except for the breeze moving through the trees and the distant sound of the creek. Then David heard it again. "Definitely not an animal. That was a human sound. Stay right here. Don't move," he told the kids, his voice suddenly serious in a way that made them both freeze in place. David moved toward the sound, stepping off the trail carefully. The ground sloped down sharply about 15 feet from where they stood. He'd walked past this spot dozens of times, but never had a reason to look down the embankment. It was steep and rocky, covered in fallen branches and thick brush. "Hello?" he called out. "Is someone there?" The groaning came again, weaker this time. David's heart started pounding. He moved closer to the edge and looked down. What he saw made his stomach drop. About 20 feet down the slope, partially hidden by bushes, was a woman. She was lying on her side in an awkward position, one leg bent at an angle that didn't look right. Her clothes were torn and dirty, and there was blood matted in her hair. "Oh my God," David breathed. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency?" "I'm at Pine Ridge State Forest on the Blue Trail about a mile in from the main parking lot. There's a woman down an embankment. She's hurt bad. She needs an ambulance right now." The dispatcher started asking questions, and David answered as best he could while his mind raced. How long had she been there? It had rained 2 nights ago. Her clothes were dirty and damp. This wasn't recent. "Sir, emergency services are on their way. Do not attempt to move her." "Can you safely reach her to assess her condition?" David looked back at his kids. They were standing exactly where he'd left them, holding hands now, their faces scared. "Sophie, take your brother and sit on that fallen log right there." Don't move, okay? I need you to be really brave right now." Sophie nodded, her face pale, and led Tyler to the log. David carefully made his way down the slope, grabbing onto trees and rocks to keep from sliding. The woman was in worse shape up close. Her face was bruised and swollen. The cut on her head looked deep. Her leg was definitely broken, twisted underneath her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" He knelt beside her, afraid to touch her but desperate to help. "Help is coming. Just hold on." Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. She tried to speak but only managed a weak sound. David shrugged off his jacket and carefully draped it over her. She was cold, too cold. His construction first aid training kicked in. "Don't move her. Keep her warm. Keep her conscious if possible. My name's David. You're going to be okay. The ambulance is coming." He had no idea if that was true, but it felt like the right thing to say. He reached into his backpack and pulled out one of the water bottles. Very carefully, he lifted her head just slightly and brought the bottle to her lips. She managed a tiny sip, then another. "That's good. That's really good," he said, his voice shaking. The woman's hand moved slightly, reaching toward him. David took it, feeling how cold her fingers were. "You're not alone," he told her. "I'm right here." Her lips moved again, and this time he could just barely make out the words. "Thank you." Then her eyes closed again, and David felt panic surge through him. But her chest was still moving. She was still breathing. "Stay with me," he said. "Come on, stay with me. What's your name? Can you tell me your name?" No response. David looked back up the slope. Sophie and Tyler were still sitting on the log, holding each other. They looked so small and scared. This was supposed to be a fun morning. This was supposed to be their time together, away from all the hard stuff. He heard sirens in the distance, getting closer. "Thank God, hear that?" he said to the woman, even though she couldn't hear him. "That's help coming. You're going to be fine." The next 30 minutes were a blur. Paramedics arrived with a stretcher and equipment. They asked David questions while they worked. How did he find her? How long ago? Did she say anything? A police officer took his statement while the paramedics carefully secured the woman to a backboard and began the difficult process of bringing her up the slope. Sophie and Tyler watched everything with wide eyes, holding onto David's legs. "You did good," one of the paramedics told David as they prepared to load the woman into the ambulance. "She's been out here at least 24 hours, maybe longer. If you hadn't found her today..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. David nodded, feeling numb. The ambulance doors closed and the siren started up again as it pulled away. The police officer finished taking notes and handed David a card. "We'll need to follow up with you. You might have saved her life today." As the emergency vehicles left and the forest grew quiet again, David looked down at his kids. Tyler's eyes were full of tears and Sophie was still clutching the butterfly net. "Is the lady going to die?" Tyler asked in a small voice. David knelt down and pulled them both into a hug. "No, buddy. She's going to get help now. She's going to be okay." He hoped that was true. He really, really hoped that was true. They didn't go see the big rocks that day. They walked slowly back to the truck, got in, and drove home. David's hands were still shaking on the steering wheel. That night, after he'd put the kids to bed and was sitting alone in his small living room, David couldn't stop thinking about that woman's face. Who was she? Did she have a family looking for her? How did she end up at the bottom of that slope? And why couldn't he shake the feeling that finding her was going to change everything? David couldn't get her out of his mind. 3 days had passed since that Sunday in the forest, and every time he closed his eyes, he saw that woman lying in the dirt, cold and broken. On Monday morning, after dropping the kids at school, he'd driven to Mercy General Hospital. He told himself he just wanted to make sure she was okay, that it was normal to check on someone whose life you might have saved. But the truth was something else. Something about the way she'd grabbed his hand, the desperate "thank you" she'd whispered. It had gotten under his skin. The woman at the information desk had looked at him with tired eyes. "Name? I don't know her name," David admitted. "She was brought in Sunday afternoon, found in Pine Ridge Forest. I'm the one who found her." The woman typed something into her computer, her expression softening slightly. "Oh, the Jane Doe. She's in intensive care, 4th floor. But visiting hours don't start until noon and only family is allowed in ICU. I understand. Can you just tell me if she's alive?" "She's alive. That's all I can say." David had gone to work after that, climbing onto scaffolding and swinging a hammer. but his mind kept drifting back to the fourth floor of Mercy General. Who was she? Why didn't anyone know her name? He went back Tuesday during his lunch break, and Wednesday. Each time the nurses told him the same thing. She was still unconscious. She had no identification. No one had reported her missing. No family had come looking. By Thursday, the nurses recognized him. A woman named Patricia, with gray hair and kind eyes, pulled him aside. "You're the one who found her," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah, she's in a coma. The doctor said she has brain swelling from the head injury. She also has a broken leg, 3 cracked ribs, and severe dehydration. She's lucky to be alive. Is she going to wake up?" Patricia's face showed the kind of honesty that comes from years of dealing with harsh realities. "We don't know, maybe not. These things are unpredictable." David felt something heavy settle in his chest. And really no one's come for her? No one. "We've checked missing persons reports. Nothing matches. No ID, no phone, nothing in the system. It's like she's a ghost." That's when David made a decision that he couldn't quite explain even to himself. "Can I see her? Just for a few minutes?" Patricia studied his face for a long moment. "You're not family, I know. But she doesn't have anybody. And I was the last person she saw before." He didn't finish the sentence. Maybe it was the look in his eyes, or maybe Patricia had a soft spot for good people doing kind things. But she nodded slowly. 5 minutes. Room 417. But if anyone asks, you're her cousin." The woman looked different under the harsh hospital lights. Her face was still swollen and bruised, but someone had cleaned her up. Her dark hair, which had been matted with blood and dirt, was now brushed and clean. She had IVs in both arms and a breathing tube in her nose. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room. David pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. He felt foolish, but he also felt like he needed to be there. "Hey," he said quietly. "I don't know if you can hear me. They say sometimes people in comas can hear. I'm David, I'm the guy who found you. I just wanted to check on you, make sure you were okay." He laughed nervously. "Well, not okay exactly. But alive." The woman didn't move. The heart monitor kept its steady rhythm. "My kids have been asking about you, Sophie and Tyler. They were with me when we found you. They've been worried." He paused. "I've been worried too." David visited every day after that. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, he brought the kids with him. They'd made get-well cards with crayons covered in flowers and smiley faces. A nurse let them tape the cards to the wall of her room. "Do you think she likes them?" Sophie asked, staring at the woman in the bed. "I think she loves them," David said. On Monday of the second week, David stopped at his house on the way to the hospital. In his small backyard, there were wild daisies growing along the fence. His wife had planted them years ago, back when she still cared about things like gardens and family. David picked a handful and put them in an old glass jar filled with water. Patricia saw him walking down the hall with the flowers and smiled. "You're a good man, you know that. I just don't like the idea of her being alone." Most people would have called 911 and moved on with their lives. "Yeah, well," David shrugged. "I'm not most people, I guess." In room 417, he set the jar of daisies on the small table next to her bed. Then he pulled out a book he'd grabbed from his shelf at home. It was an old paperback of short stories, nothing fancy, but it was something. "I thought maybe you'd like to hear something other than beeping machines," he said to the unconscious woman. "I'm not much of a reader, but my daughter got me into this book last year." He opened to the first story and started reading aloud. His voice felt strange in the quiet room, but he kept going. When visiting hours ended, he marked his place and promised to come back tomorrow. The nurses thought he was crazy, but in a sweet way. One of them, a young guy named Chris, pulled him aside on Wednesday. "Hey man, you know you don't owe her anything, right? You already saved her life." "I know," David said. "But everybody needs somebody. She doesn't have anybody else." That afternoon, while David was reading to her, something happened. The woman's fingers twitched. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but David saw it. His heart jumped. "Hey, did you see that?" He called to Patricia, who was checking another patient's chart nearby. Patricia came over and watched carefully. The woman's hand moved again, just slightly. "I'll get the doctor," Patricia said, moving quickly. David took the woman's hand, the same way he had in the forest. "Come on, you can do this. Wake up. Please wake up." The doctor came in with 2 nurses. They checked her vitals, looked at her pupils with a light, did all sorts of tests while David stood in the corner, his heart pounding. She's showing signs of emerging from the coma, the doctor said. It might happen fast or it might take days. But this is good. This is very good. Over the next 2 days, David barely left her side. He called in sick to work, which he couldn't afford to do, but somehow it didn't matter. His boss wasn't happy, but David didn't care. On Friday afternoon, 2 weeks after he'd found her in the woods, the woman's eyes opened. David was reading to her when it happened. He looked up from the book and saw her staring at him, confused and unfocused, but definitely awake. "Oh my God," he breathed. "You're awake. Hold on, let me get the nurse." He pressed the call button repeatedly until Patricia rushed in. "She's awake." The next hour was chaos. Doctors and nurses filling the room, checking everything, asking her questions she couldn't answer. The woman seemed terrified and disoriented, her eyes darting around the room like she didn't know where she was or how she'd gotten there. Finally, when things calmed down and most of the medical staff had left, David approached the bed carefully. "Hi," he said softly. "I'm David, do you remember me?" The woman stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly tears started rolling down her face. "You," she whispered, her voice rough from weeks of not using it. "You're the angel. I'm not an angel. I'm just a guy who happened to be in the right place. You saved me. In the woods." "I remember your voice." David felt his own eyes getting wet. "Yeah, that was me. What's your name?" she asked. He laughed. "I just told you, David." "David," she repeated like she was committing it to memory. "David, what's your name?" he asked gently. The woman opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. Her face went blank, then confused, then panicked. I don't know." "Why don't I know?" A doctor stepped in. "It's okay. You've been through trauma. Some memory loss is normal. It might come back slowly." But as the days passed, her name didn't come back. Nothing came back. The doctor said it was retrograde amnesia, caused by the head injury. She might recover her memories, or she might not. There was no way to predict. The police tried everything. Fingerprints weren't in any system. Facial recognition came up empty. Dental records led nowhere. She was a complete mystery. They started calling her Jane because they had to call her something. David kept visiting. Now that she was awake, they actually talked. She was intelligent, he could tell that much. She spoke well, had a dry sense of humor, asked thoughtful questions. But she had no idea who she was or where she came from. "It's terrifying," she admitted one evening. David had brought Chinese takeout and they were eating together in her hospital room. "I look in the mirror and I see a stranger. I don't know if I have a family, parents, kids, a husband, nothing." "It'll come back," David said, though he had no idea if that was true. "What if it doesn't? What if I never remember?" "Then you start over. Build a new life," Jane laughed bitterly.
With what?
"I have nothing. No money. No identity. Nowhere to go when they discharge me." David had been thinking about this for days. It was a crazy idea. Probably the craziest thing he'd ever considered. But looking at her sitting there, lost and alone, he couldn't help himself. "You could stay with me. Temporarily. Just until you figure things out." Jane looked at him like he'd grown a second head. "What? I have a guest room. It's small, but it's something. You could stay there until you get back on your feet. Or until your memory comes back. You don't even know me." "No," David admitted. "But I know you're a good person who's had something terrible happen to her. And I know what it's like to feel alone." Jane stared at him for a long time. "Why?" The guest room in David's house was barely bigger than a closet, with a single bed, a small dresser, and a window that looked out onto the neighbor's fence. It wasn't much, but Jane stood in the doorway and looked at it like it was a palace. "It's perfect," she said quietly. David set down the small bag the hospital had given her, containing a few basic clothes donated by a local charity and some toiletries. It was everything she owned in the world. Bathrooms down the hall. Kitchen's always open. Help yourself to whatever. I usually make breakfast around 7 before I take the kids to school. He paused, suddenly nervous. "Is this weird?" "This feels weird," Jane laughed, and it was the first time he'd heard her really laugh. "It's incredibly weird. A complete stranger living in your house. But I'm grateful. More grateful than I can say." The first few days were awkward. Jane moved through the house like a ghost, trying not to take up space or be a burden. She'd wake up early and have coffee made before David got up. She'd clean things that didn't need cleaning. She barely spoke unless spoken to. Sophie and Tyler were fascinated by her, They'd made her cards in the hospital and now they had a million questions. "Do you really not remember anything?" Tyler asked one morning at breakfast. "Tyler, that's rude," David said quickly. "No, it's okay." Jane smiled at the 6-year-old. "I really don't. It's like my life started the day your dad found me in the woods." "That's so weird," Sophie said, her eyes wide. "What if you were a princess? Or a spy?" "I don't think I'm a princess, sweetie. But you could be. You don't know." Jane helped with dinner that evening. David was making spaghetti, nothing fancy, and she offered to help with the salad. As she chopped vegetables, he noticed her hands moved with practiced precision. She held the knife the right way, made quick, even cuts. "You've done this before," he observed. Jane looked down at her hands like they belonged to someone else. "I guess so. It feels natural. Maybe you were a chef. Maybe." But she looked doubtful. Over the next couple of weeks, they settled into a routine. Jane was good with the kids, patient in a way that made David wonder if she had children of her own somewhere. She'd help Sophie with homework and play building blocks with Tyler. She'd fold laundry and wash dishes, always insisting on contributing somehow. "You don't have to do all this," David told her one evening. "You're still recovering." "I need to feel useful," Jane said. "I need to feel like I'm not just a burden." "You're not a burden." But sometimes, late at night, David would hear her crying in the guest room. He'd stand outside her door, hand raised to knock, but he never did. Some pain was too private to share. One Saturday, David had to go pick up some supplies for a side job he'd taken on to make extra money. Jane offered to watch the kids. "Are you sure?" David asked. "That's a lot to ask." "I want to, really." While David was gone, Jane played with Sophie and Tyler in the backyard. They were chasing each other around, laughing, when Tyler tripped and scraped his knee. He started crying and Jane immediately went into action. She cleaned the wound, applied antibiotic ointment, and bandaged it with steady, confident hands. "You're good at that," Sophie observed. "Like a doctor." Jane paused, the bandage half applied. Something flickered in her mind. White coats, the smell of antiseptic, but then it was gone, like trying to remember a dream. "Maybe I was a nurse," she said, but it didn't feel right. That night, after the kids were asleep, Jane and David sat on the back porch. It was a warm evening, and the sounds of crickets filled the air. "Can I ask you something?" Jane said. "Sure. Why are you really doing this? And don't say it's just because you're a nice person. There's got to be more to it." David was quiet for a long moment. "My wife left 3 years ago. Just packed a bag one day and said she couldn't do it anymore. The kids, the struggling, the small-town life. She wanted more. She wanted different." He picked at the label on his beer bottle. "For a long time I was angry. Felt like I'd failed somehow, like I wasn't enough. That's not your fault. I know, but knowing it and feeling it are different things." He looked at her. "When I found you in those woods, when you grabbed my hand and thanked me, I felt like I mattered. Like I'd done something important. Something real." Jane reached over and squeezed his hand. "You did. You saved my life. Maybe you saved mine too, in a different way." They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. But the peace couldn't last forever. 3 weeks after Jane moved in, David came home from work to find a police car in his driveway. His heart immediately jumped into his throat. The kids. He ran into the house and found Sophie and Tyler sitting on the couch, wide-eyed, while 2 police officers and a woman in an expensive suit talked to Jane in the kitchen. Jane looked pale and shocked. "What's going on?" David demanded. One of the officers turned. "You're David Chen?" "Yeah, what's this about?" The woman in the suit stepped forward. She was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and perfectly styled hair. "Mr. Chen, my name is Helen Rodriguez. I'm an attorney with Sterling and Associates. We represent Ashford Industries, okay, and..." Helen looked at Jane. "We've been looking for Miss Ashford for over 2 months. She went missing during a private hiking retreat. Her company has had investigators searching everywhere." David looked at Jane. "Ashford? Is that your name?" Jane looked like she might be sick. "I don't know. I don't remember." "Her name is Victoria Ashford," Helen continued. "She's the CEO and majority shareholder of Ashford Industries, one of the largest tech manufacturing companies in the country." The room went silent except for the ticking of the kitchen clock. "That's impossible," David finally said. "She doesn't remember anything. She's been living here because she had nowhere else to go." We've been monitoring missing persons reports and hospital admissions. When we saw the report of an unidentified woman matching her description found in Pine Ridge Forest, we requested a fingerprint comparison. We got the confirmation this morning. Helen pulled out her phone and showed them a picture. It was Jane, but different. Professional clothes, hairstyled perfectly, standing in front of a glass building with Ashford Industries visible in the background. Jane stared at the photo like it was of a stranger. "That's me?" "That's you," Helen said gently. "Ms. Ashford, your company has been in chaos. Your board of directors has been operating under the assumption that you might be deceased. Your children..." "Children?" Jane's voice broke. "I have children?" "2. Adults. They're both waiting at the corporate office to see you." David felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. CEO, children, a whole life that Jane, Victoria, whoever she was, had been living. A life that had nothing to do with his small house and spaghetti dinners and backyard cricket sounds. "I don't remember any of this," Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. "I don't remember being a CEO. I don't remember children. I don't remember anything." Helen's expression softened. "The doctor said you might have amnesia. They warned us. But your company needs you. Your family needs you. We need to bring you home." "This is her home," David said before he could stop himself. Everyone turned to look at him. "I mean, for now. This is where she's been staying. You can't just drag her away when she doesn't even remember who you're talking about." "Mr. Chen, I understand you've been very kind to Ms. Ashford. The company is prepared to compensate you generously for your time and expenses." "I don't want your money," David snapped. "I want what's best for her." Helen looked between them and something shifted in her expression. "Understanding, maybe. Ms. Ashford, I'm not here to force you to do anything. But you need to know the truth about who you are. You have responsibilities, people depending on you, a life to return to." Victoria looked at David, her eyes desperate. "I don't know what to do." "It's not my choice," David said gently, even though his chest felt tight. "It's yours." That night, after the police and Helen had left with promises to return tomorrow with more information, Victoria sat in the guest room that had been her home for 3 weeks. David found her there, staring at the phone Helen had given her. It was her phone, apparently recovered from her car, that had been found near the hiking trail. "There are hundreds of messages," she said numbly, "from people I don't know, people I should know." David sat down next to her on the small bed. "Memories or not, that's still your life. Those are still your responsibilities. What if I don't want that life? What if I like this one better? You don't know what you're saying. You're a CEO, you have kids. You probably live in some amazing house and have everything you could want." "I want to remember," Victoria whispered. "I want to know who I was. But I'm also terrified. What if I don't like the person I was? What if that Victoria was miserable? Then you change. But you can't hide from your life forever." Victoria looked at him, really looked at him. "These past few weeks, living here with you and Sophie and Tyler, they've been the happiest I can remember. Which I know is a stupid thing to say because I can only remember 3 weeks, but still, I felt safe here. I felt like I mattered as a person, not as whoever Victoria Ashford is supposed to be. You do matter, and you always will. But those kids of yours, they've been looking for you. They deserve to know you're alive." The next morning, a black car pulled up outside David's house. Helen Rodriguez got out, along with 2 other people, a young woman in her late 20s and a man about the same. The penthouse apartment overlooked the entire city. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble floors, furniture that probably cost more than David's truck. Victoria stood in the middle of it all and felt absolutely nothing. "This is your home," her daughter Alexis said gently. "Does any of it look familiar?" Victoria walked through the room slowly. A massive kitchen she'd apparently never cooked in. A bedroom with a bed so big it could fit 5 people. A closet full of designer clothes with tags still on them. Everything was beautiful and expensive and completely foreign. "No," she finally said. "It's like walking through a stranger's house." Her son, Richard, was less patient than his sister. He'd barely spoken to Victoria since they'd brought her here 3 days ago. Now he stood by the window, arms crossed, his expression hard. "The board meeting is tomorrow," he said. "You need to be there. They need to see you're alive and capable." "Capable of what? I don't remember anything about running a company." "You'll have Helen and the executive team to guide you. You just need to show up and look like you're in control." Victoria felt a spike of anger. Look like I'm in control? I'm not a puppet, Richard. I didn't mean, yes, you did. She turned to face him. Tell me something. Were we close? Before the accident? Richard's jaw tightened. What kind of question is that? An honest one. Because right now you're treating me like a business problem, not your mother. Alexis stepped between them. We're all under stress. Richard, maybe give us some space? After he left, Alexis sat down on the couch and patted the seat next to her. Victoria sat feeling exhausted. He's scared, Alexis said. We both are. For 2 months we thought you were dead. The company was preparing for the worst. Richard and I were fighting with the board about succession. It was a nightmare. Fighting? Why would you be fighting? Alexis looked uncomfortable. Dad left you majority control of the company when he died 5 years ago. Richard and I each got 20%. If you were declared dead, there was a complicated situation about who would take over. Things got ugly. Victoria processed this. So you and your brother were arguing about my company while I was in a coma? It sounds terrible when you say it like that. But what were we supposed to do? The company needed leadership. We were trying to honor Dad's legacy. What about my legacy? Did anyone actually care about finding me or just about the company? Alexis flinched. That's not fair, isn't it? I've been back 3 days. You've taken me to the office twice, introduced me to dozens of people whose names I can't remember, and shown me reports I don't understand. But has anyone asked me how I'm feeling? If I'm okay? If I want this? Do you not want it? Victoria stood up and walked to the window. The city stretched out below her. Millions of lights, millions of people. I don't know what I want, but I know that construction worker with 2 kids and a house that's falling apart treated me with more kindness and respect than my own children have. That's not fair, Alexis repeated, her voice breaking. You don't understand what it was like. Thinking you were dead, planning your funeral, fighting with Richard every day. I wanted to fall apart, but I couldn't because someone had to keep things together. Victoria turned back. Her daughter's eyes were red, tears threatening to spill. And suddenly, despite the lack of memories, Victoria felt something. A pull. A need to comfort. She crossed the room and pulled Alexis into a hug. I'm sorry. You're right. I don't understand. I can't remember. All I know is right now, this moment. They stood there for a long time holding each other. It was the first moment that felt real since Victoria had left David's house. The board meeting the next day was brutal. 12 people sat around a massive conference table, all eyes on Victoria as she walked in. Helen had briefed her for hours, feeding her information about the company, the board members, the current projects. But it all felt like trying to memorize facts for a test in a subject she'd never studied. Ladies and gentlemen, Helen began, as you know, Ms. Ashford has returned after a traumatic accident. While she's still recovering, she wanted to address you all directly. Victoria stood at the head of the table, feeling every eye on her. These people were supposed to work for her. She was supposed to be their leader, but she felt like an imposter. I won't pretend to remember you, she said, deciding honesty was the only option. I don't remember this company or the work we do or what my role was before the accident. But I'm here, I'm alive, and I'm going to learn. A man with silver hair spoke up. With all due respect, Ms. Ashford, the company can't run on good intentions. We have deadlines, contracts, thousands of employees depending on us. How can you lead when you don't even remember what we do? Then teach me, Victoria said. That's what you're here for, isn't it? To advise and guide? Another board member, a woman with sharp features, leaned forward. The question we all have is whether you're competent to resume your role as CEO. Your condition raises serious concerns. Victoria felt her temper flare. My condition is that I survived, that I'm standing here instead of being dead in the woods. If that's a problem for you, no one's saying it's a problem, Helen interjected smoothly. But there are legal and practical considerations. The board has a fiduciary duty to the company and its shareholders. The meeting went on for hours. Technical discussions about quarterly projections and market positions and manufacturing issues. Victoria tried to follow, taking notes, asking questions, but mostly she felt lost. During a break, she stepped outside into a private garden on the executive floor. Richard found her there. That was rough, he said. They think I'm incompetent. They think you're vulnerable. There's a difference. He sat down on a bench, and for the first time he looked less angry and more tired. Can I ask you something? Sure, that guy. The one who found you, David, were you two? No, Victoria said quickly. Nothing like that. He was just kind to me when I had no one else. Richard nodded slowly. Mom, before the accident, you and I didn't get along. We fought constantly about the company, about Dad's legacy, about everything. Why? Because I thought you were losing yourself in the work. You were at the office 18 hours a day. You barely ate, barely slept. Alexis and I were worried about you, but whenever we tried to talk to you about it, you'd shut us down. You said we didn't understand the pressure you were under. Victoria absorbed this. Was I happy? I don't think so. I think you were driven and successful and powerful. But happy? No. I don't think you'd been happy since Dad died. That night, alone in the massive penthouse, Victoria couldn't sleep. She walked through the rooms, looking at photos on the walls. Her wedding day to a man she didn't remember. Her children as babies. Corporate events where she stood in evening gowns, smiling for cameras. The woman in these photos looked confident and put together. But Richard was right. Her eyes looked empty. Victoria found herself thinking about David's small house. The way Sophie would climb onto her lap and show her drawings. The way Tyler would tell elaborate stories about nothing. The way David would make terrible jokes while cooking dinner and they'd all laugh anyway. Simple things. Real things. Her phone buzzed. A text from David. Hey, just checking in. How are you doing? She smiled. The first genuine smile in days. Drowning. But surviving. How are the kids?
Missing you.
Tyler asked if you're coming back to visit. Victoria felt her chest tighten. I don't know. Everything's complicated here. Life's always complicated. But don't forget you have friends if you need them. Friends. Such a simple word. But it meant everything. The next week was a whirlwind. More meetings. More introductions. More information dumped into her brain. Helen had hired a private doctor who confirmed the amnesia was real and might be permanent. The board reluctantly agreed to let Victoria resume her role, but with oversight from a committee. Victoria threw herself into learning. She studied files late into the night, memorized names and faces, forced herself to understand the business her father had built, and she'd apparently expanded. She was good at it, she realized. Even without memories, something clicked. The logic of business, the strategy, the big picture thinking. It felt natural, but something else felt wrong. One afternoon, she called a meeting with the head of HR and the CFO. I want to see our employee benefits package, she said. They looked confused but brought the documentation. Victoria read through it carefully. Healthcare that barely covered basics, limited parental leave, retirement plans that would barely support someone in old age. This is what we offer people? She asked. It's industry standard, the CFO said. It's terrible. People can't live on this. Ms. Ashford, with all due respect, improving benefits would cost millions. It would impact our profit margins. Victoria thought about David working 6 days a week, struggling to pay bills, taking his kids to the free forest instead of anywhere that cost money. How much am I worth? She asked suddenly. The CFO blinked. I'm sorry? My net worth. What am I worth? Including your shares in the company real estate investments, approximately $2 billion. $2 billion. Victoria felt sick. She'd been living with a man who could barely afford groceries while she was sitting on $2 billion. And how much would it cost to significantly improve benefits for all our employees? 50, maybe 60 million annually. Do it, Victoria said. Ms. Ashford, do it. We can afford it. Figure out. Victoria stood at the edge of the embankment where David had found her 3 months ago. The forest was quiet except for the sound of wind moving through the trees. She closed her eyes and tried to remember what had brought her here that day. Nothing came. Just emptiness where memories should be. Helen stood a respectful distance away, giving her space. Victoria had insisted on coming alone, but her lawyer had absolutely refused to let her go into the woods without someone nearby. Anything? Helen called. No. Victoria opened her eyes and looked down the slope. Someone had cleared away most of the brush, probably the rescue team. She could see the exact spot where she'd lain broken and dying. Tell me again what you know about why I was here. Helen walked closer. According to your assistant, you'd blocked off 3 days for a private retreat. You told no one where you were going. You drove yourself to a rental cabin near the forest and apparently went hiking alone. That seems foolish. Your assistant thought so too, but you'd been under enormous stress. The company was going through a difficult merger negotiation. Your son Richard was pushing to expand into markets you weren't sure about. The board was divided. She said you looked exhausted. Victoria tried to imagine the woman she'd been, driving out here alone, hiking these trails, running from something, or toward something. Do you think I was trying to hurt myself? The investigators found your car with a note inside. You'd written that you needed time to think, to figure out if you wanted to continue as CEO. But there was nothing to suggest suicidal intent. The evidence suggests you simply fell. Wrong place at the wrong time. Or right place at the right time, Victoria murmured. She spent another hour walking the trails, hoping something would trigger a memory. But the forest kept its secrets. Finally, she got back in the car and told the driver to take her to David's house. She hadn't told him she was coming. When she knocked on the door that afternoon, his expression was complete surprise. Victoria? What are you doing here? Can I come in? David stepped aside. The house looked exactly the same. Small, cramped, but somehow warmer than her massive penthouse. Sophie and Tyler were at school, he explained. He'd just gotten home from work, still in his dusty construction clothes. Sorry about the mess, he said, quickly moving some toys off the couch. It's not messy. It's lived in. Victoria sat down. I went back to the forest today. The place where you found me. Did you remember anything? No, but I realized something. The woman I was before the fall, she was miserable. My son told me I worked 18-hour days. My assistant said I looked exhausted all the time. I was so caught up in running the company that I'd forgotten how to live. David sat down in the chair across from her. And now? Now I don't know who I am. But I know who I don't want to be. I don't want to be that woman who was so lost she had to run away to the woods alone. She looked at him directly. David, I had my lawyer investigate you. I'm sorry, I know that's invasive, but I needed to know. His expression shuddered. Know what? About the medical debt. About the mortgage. About how you're drowning financially, but you still took in a stranger and asked for nothing in return. I don't want your charity, Victoria. Good, because I'm not offering charity. I'm offering something else. She pulled out a folder from her bag. I'm creating a new division of Ashford Industries. We're going to build affordable housing for working families, real housing that people can actually afford on normal salaries. And I want you to run it, David stared at her. What? You know construction. You understand what working families need because you are one. I need someone who won't just see profit margins and build cheap boxes. I need someone who will build real homes with real heart. Victoria, I barely finished high school. I can't run a division of $1 billion company. Why not? I'll give you a team, resources, training. Your job is to be the heart of it, to make sure we're building something that actually matters. She pulled out another document. The salary is $300,000 a year, plus benefits that will actually cover your family's needs. Plus I'm personally paying off your medical debt and your mortgage. No. David stood up, his face flushed. Absolutely not. I won't be bought. You're not being bought. You're being paid what you're worth. Victoria stood too.
David, you saved my life.
But more than that, you showed me what real kindness looks like, what real integrity looks like. For 3 weeks I lived in your home and you treated me with more respect and dignity than my own family did. Let me do this. Let me help you the way you helped me. This is too much. It's not nearly enough. Victoria's voice broke. You gave me a home when I had nothing. You made me feel human when I'd forgotten what that meant. Please, let me give you something back. David was quiet for a long time. What about the kids? This job, would I have to relocate? There's an Ashford facility 40 minutes from here. You could work from there or work remotely most of the time. I want you close to your kids. That's non-negotiable. Why are you really doing this? Victoria thought about that question. Because when I woke up in that hospital with no memory, I had a choice. I could have run back to my old life immediately. But I didn't. I stayed with you. And for 3 weeks I was happier than apparently I'd been in years. That means something. You mean something. She paused. And because everybody deserves a chance to not just survive, but actually live. David ran his hand through his hair. This is crazy. Probably. Is that a yes? He looked at her for a long moment, then slowly smiled. Yeah, it's a yes. Over the next 3 months, everything changed. David started his new position. And while it was overwhelming at first, Victoria had been right. He understood what families needed in a way the corporate executives never could. His first project was a development of 50 homes designed for single parents and working families. Affordable but beautiful, with community spaces and good schools nearby. Victoria threw herself into transforming Ashford Industries. She improved benefits company-wide, despite the board's complaints. She started a foundation dedicated to supporting single parents, funding childcare, education, and emergency assistance. She named it the Chen Foundation, which made David turn bright red when he found out. But more than the business changes, Victoria changed. She stopped working 18-hour days. She started having dinner with her children. Real dinners where they talked and laughed and slowly rebuilt the relationship that had fractured. Richard came around eventually. It took time, but one evening over dinner he admitted, "You're different now, Mom. Softer, but somehow stronger too." "Nearly dying will do that to you," Victoria said. "It's more than that. You're actually happy now." I can see it, he was right. She was happy. Not because she'd regained her memories, those were still gone. But because she'd built something new, something better. She visited David's house regularly, brought pizza for movie nights with the kids, helped Sophie with science fair projects, taught Tyler how to play chess. The lines between boss and employee, between CEO and construction worker, between the woman who'd been lost and the man who'd found her, they all blurred into something simpler. Friendship. Real, genuine friendship. One Sunday, almost 6 months after David had found her in the woods, Victoria suggested they all go hiking. "Back to Pine Ridge Forest, are you sure?" David asked. "Won't that be hard?" "Maybe, but I want the kids to see it." The place where everything changed. They hiked the Blue Trail together, Sophie and Tyler running ahead like always, while David and Victoria walked side by side. When they reached the spot where he'd found her, Victoria stood there quietly. "What are you thinking?" David asked. "That if I had to lose everything to find this, it was worth it." She looked at him. "Does that sound crazy?" "A little, but I get it." Sophie came running back, out of breath and excited. "Dad, Victoria, there's a deer up ahead." "A whole family of them." They all went to look, standing together at the edge of the trail. The deer grazed peacefully, a mother and 2 fawns completely unaware of the humans watching them. "Make a wish," Tyler whispered. "When you see a deer, you're supposed to make a wish." Victoria closed her eyes. But she didn't wish for her memories back. She didn't wish to be the person she'd been before. She wished for more moments exactly like this one. When they got back to David's house later, Victoria's phone was blowing up with messages. A crisis at the office, some contract negotiation going wrong, the usual corporate drama. "I have to go," she said reluctantly. "I know. Go save the world, CEO lady." David smiled, but as Victoria was getting into her car, he called out, "Hey, Victoria." She turned back. "Same time next Sunday? For another hike?" "Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it." As she drove away, Victoria glanced in the rearview mirror. David stood on his porch with Sophie and Tyler, all 3 of them waving goodbye. Her family in the city, her responsibilities at the company, they were important. But so was this. These simple Sunday mornings with people who cared about her for who she was, not what she had. A year later, Ashford Industries announced a new initiative. They were building affordable housing developments in 12 cities, all designed with input from the families who would live there. The Chen Foundation had helped over 5,000 single parents get back on their feet. The company's employee satisfaction had tripled, and productivity had gone up accordingly. The business